I'm joined here now with Canadian author Kristi Charish. Now, for our viewers who may not know much about you, could you just give some background into yourself and your work?
Back in about 2012, 2013, I finished my PhD in cell biology and genetics. And I realized that my career was going to be doing research in a lab and writing reports and managing other students. And after about 15 years, I realized that's not exactly the direction I wanted to go. I really loved being in a lab. And I started thinking to myself, well, I'm going to graduate soon. What is the one job out there? If I'm playing fantasy job, what's the one job out there that wouldn't feel like work? It would just be my dream job. And I loved reading. I loved science fiction. I loved fantasy. I'd be reading it up on the bus up to UBC while I had my microscope going. And I thought to myself, well, what if I tried writing? And so I started writing while I was writing up my thesis. So I'd give myself an hour of fun writing and an hour of my thesis, and rapidly that turned into 2 to 3 hours of fun writing, an hour of my thesis. And by the time I was ready to defend my PhD, I had my thesis done, but I also had my first science fiction novel, Owl in the Japanese Circus. And as a bit of a lark, I thought, well, what's the next step once you have a novel? Let's just have fun and see if I can get it published. And I ended up, sending it out to an agent, and she was interested. And the next thing I knew, I had a publishing deal with Simon and Schuster, and I've never really looked back.
And with your Owl series, obviously you've released it over the course of the past few years, but as you mentioned, it is one of your first books. So could you just give some background into it for readers who may be interested?
Yeah, absolutely. Owl in the Japanese Circus is about a reluctant Indiana Jane style character who has one rule: no supernatural jobs. She's an archaeology grad student turned antiquities thief. And lo and behold, in the novel, she of course gets wrapped up in the supernatural world, and a dragon insists that she find something that's gone missing thousands of years ago, and she really doesn't have a choice but to do it. So it's an adventure fantasy.
In 2020, you released the third installment of the Kincaid Strange series titled Voodoo Shanghai. So where did the inspiration come from for this series?
Yeah, so Kincaid Strange is a voodoo practitioner who lives in Seattle with the ghost of a grunge rocker. And I started, it's a mystery, murder mystery series with ghosts and zombies and all sorts of supernatural, sort of ghostly creatures. That series was, I grew up in the 90s. So I was sort of there during that, sort of during the grunge music. I was in my early teens. And so I always wanted to do something with just that. I always wanted to write a novel with that kind of grunge feel, and what it kind of, some of that atmosphere of what it felt like to be a teen in the 90s. So there's a lot of that in there. But it also was heavily inspired by trips I had a chance to take down to Seattle and Portland, where I got to see the underground cities. So there are these warrens of old Seattle and old Portland, which of course burned down in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And there's all of this history to sort of this old West vibe from the late 1800s. And the history is just so rich and really stranger than fiction that I really wanted to wrap that into a novel.
And like you said, with the history that you're kind of working with, this kind of helps you delve more into the writing and really bring it to life for readers.
Yeah, I tried. A lot of the ghosts that populate Kincaid Strange are from so in the series, the Seattle Underground is this of course, I embellish it quite a bit, but it's this pseudo supernatural place where all the zombies and ghosts hang out, and some of the practitioners who talk to the dead. And populating that city was a lot of fun. One of my favorite characters to write is Lee Lang, who is the zombie with the mostest in who runs the underground city, and a bar called Damaged Goods. And I base her off of a kind of courtesan who lived in Seattle in the late 1800s, and ran these boarding houses and such. And so there really is so much history to draw on that it's kind of an author's dream.
That's awesome. And if anyone is interested in your work, where is the best place to go?
You know what? I always like to tell people go to the library first, because my books are in the library, and it's always great to support your local librarians. And but Chapters, Amazon, all the local places that you would find books is where I am.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Kristi.
Thanks for having me, Jasmine.